I have a confession to make. I have reviewed some great portable power stations over the past year, but for as wildly capable and impressive as they've been, and they have been impressive, they've all suffered from one huge Achilles heel. They're too big. They're too big for us to take camping, and some of them are so damn heavy that I've been legitimately worried I'm gonna hurt myself carrying them around.
Oh, my back.
So I just got my hands on a modular power station system from Bluetti. And now that I've spent some time with it, it's got me thinking that this might actually be the perfect solution for the way most overlanders and campers are utilizing power stations. So let's talk about it. Now, I suppose I should start with a quick overview of what you're looking at here. So this is the Bluetti AC60P, and it is a 504 watt-hour power station with the ability to output a continuous 600 watts. Over here, we have the B80P expansion battery from Bluetti, and this has an 806 watt-hour capacity all on its own. And for those of you who are not colorblind, you probably noticed that these are orange, which is a little different for a Bluetti power station. And the reason for that is because these are both part of Bluetti's premium series of power stations, which honestly come with some pretty cool advantages. Probably the biggest of which for these is that both of these come with an IP65 rating against water and dust intrusion. So to take these out camping, if you have them moving around camp and you get a little rain shower or you get some dust in them, you don't have to worry about them, it's gonna be just fine. The other big difference is that compared to the regular AC60, the AC60P gets an additional 100 watt hours of capacity, but it's in the same size, same footprint, which means that this is more energy dense. And when we're talking about space constraints, it's a pretty big benefit. Both of these are really compact and really light. In fact, they each weigh right around 20 pounds, and they are super compact in size, which means it's so much easier to carry them around and to fit them in our vehicles. And because of that, it has been an absolute pleasure taking these out on adventures. And just to illustrate my point here, both of these power stations happen to fit perfectly in the backseat center footwell of our Tacoma, a space that doesn't really get used for anything else. So that's really nice to have a power station that really isn't taking up any usable space in our vehicle. Okay, so they're small, but that doesn't really matter if they aren't powerful enough to handle all the devices that most of us use when we're out exploring and camping. And this is where the modularity comes in. It is by far my favorite thing about these two units, because if you go with a setup like this, you effectively have two power stations that can operate independently from one another, but then you have the ability to connect them together. And when you do, you now have 1,310 watt hours of capacity, which is approaching the amount that you get out of some of the much larger and much heavier power stations. So depending on what your needs are for a particular trip, let's say you're just going out for a one-nighter, you could just bring one of them. Or you can do what we've been doing, which is bringing both of them and using one of them just solely to charge our fridge and having the other one accessible to move around camp, put it wherever it's most convenient, and charge all of our other devices. That is something we've never really had the luxury of doing before, because with one power station, it's, assuming you have a fridge, basically going to be hooked up to that fridge at all times. And for most setups, most people that I've seen, that means it's somewhere in your vehicle that's not super accessible. And that means that it can be a little bit of a pain if you got to get back there to charge devices, plug things in, etc., etc. Speaking of powering a fridge, I mean, let's be honest. For most of us who are out overlanding and camping, powering a fridge is sort of the main prerequisite for a power station. And that's where I have kind of fallen in love with the B80P, because even though this is sold primarily as an expansion battery, it's actually kind of the perfect power station for charging a fridge. For one thing, it has 806 watt hours of capacity, which in my real world testing was enough to power our fridge for over 2 days sitting at camp. Not driving, not charging, no solar, just sitting there for 48 hours powering our fridge. It's pretty impressive. Plus it has a 12-volt output so that you can connect it to your fridge. And because it's primarily designed as an expansion battery, it's super compact. It also, though, still has a USB-A and a USB-C output, so you could really get away with using this as your only power station. You could still charge some of your other devices. It doesn't have a screen, but honestly, I don't miss that so much. The only thing that I wish it had that it doesn't is app connectivity, because as it is, it can be a bit tough to know exactly how much power it has remaining. It does have these lights that kind of indicate percentage left, so that's fine, but if you have this thing tucked away somewhere, kind of inaccessible, the app would definitely make life a lot easier to monitor its status. So that's probably the only thing that holds it back from being perfect, but it's really, really good. Then there's the AC60P. This is definitely the more full-featured power station of the two. It's got the nice screen, it has 2 AC outputs, it has a USB-C, 2 USB-A, and it has a wireless charging pad on top, something that I have always praised Bluetti power stations for. I love that feature. It also has a surprisingly useful light in the back, something I've not seen on another Bluetti power station. It has 3 settings, and it's actually pretty useful for illuminating a space at night. I suppose the only other thing that I might want to see on this particular power station is another USB-C. With so many devices going USB-C, that would be nice, but it's not really a deal breaker. We just came back from a trip where we used the AC60P as our only power station, and it managed to keep our fridge running for 36 hours at camp while also charging our other devices, cameras, drones, and cell phones, which was pretty impressive. Another nice thing about both of these power stations is that both of them can be charged with solar at up to 200 watts, which is great for when you're spending extended amounts of time at camp. It'd be easy to get more than the 48 hours and the 36 hours of use that we got out of these just by hooking up some solar, as long as we have some sun. But yeah, I love the modularity of these, in case you can't tell, and being able to sort of mix and match how we use them depending on specific trip needs. It's always just really, really nice to be able to travel lighter for short trips. And with this setup, my favorite thing is being able to have one of these dedicated to powering our fridge, freeing the other one up to be wherever is most convenient and charge all of our other stuff. Oh, and one last note on modularity. You can actually connect up to 2 B80P expansion batteries to the AC60P. It's got 2 inputs right here, which would give you a total capacity of 2,116 watt hours in case you needed even more expandability out of this setup. Now, just to touch on a few other things that you might want to know about these power stations if you're considering them. First, from a design standpoint, they are definitely well built. These are part of Bluetti's premium lineup of power stations, as I mentioned earlier, and they do feel premium. Very solid, plus they have retractable handles, which means that 1, of course, they're easier to transport, but 2, when they're retracted, you can stack these on top of each other, or it just makes things a little bit more packable. When it comes to charging, the AC60P can be charged from 0 to 100% in 1 hour, and both of these can be charged through solar at up to 200 watts or using 12 volt in your car, which is nice. Both use lithium iron phosphate batteries, which is what you want in any power station because they last substantially longer than lithium ion phosphate batteries, as well as being safer. Just know, lithium iron phosphate, that's what you want. Both of these offer a 6-year warranty. One thing I love about Bluetti is that they really do stand behind their products. And of course, they build some really cool stuff. They really are a technology pioneer when it comes to clean energy and portable energy. And I love working with them for that reason. So obviously, I like these power stations a lot, but I don't want to paint the picture that this is the perfect setup because, well, the perfect setup doesn't exist. Just like the perfect vehicle build doesn't exist, what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for someone else. As with anything, there are some drawbacks to a solution like this. Probably the biggest of which is the output limitation. Since the AC60P can only output a consistent 600 watts, you're not going to be using this for things like electric cooking or powering appliances like hair dryers or coffee makers. Those things just draw too much power. And honestly, even if you could power them, you would drain these batteries relatively quickly. But as I mentioned earlier in this video, I think that most people who are into overlanding or remote camping, including us most of the time, frankly, all we really need a power station to do is continually power a fridge and be able to charge our phones and cameras and drones and laptops or whatever smaller devices we're bringing. And this setup will definitely handle that. Probably with one exception, which I guess leads me to the second drawback. And that is, if you're looking for a long-term off-grid solution for camping, if you want to be out for weeks at a time, or you want to set up camp and you want to stay there for days on end, you might want to consider a battery with more capacity. That doesn't mean that you can't do it with a setup like this, because with 200 watts of solar input, as long as you have some sun, you're gonna be able to keep these batteries topped off. It's just that you don't have quite as much capacity to play with, so if you find yourself without sun for a day or two, or you've got a lot of devices that you need to charge, you might find that after a handful of days in one spot, you could run into some issues. And then lastly, it's certainly not the cheapest way to get into a portable Bluetti power station setup. If you were to buy both of these together, you're looking at about $1,400 for both of them. And Bluetti offers some larger capacity power stations, which offer a similar capacity and more output for a bit less money. But of course, the trade-off is you don't get the modularity and they're gonna be bigger and heavier. Outside of those two drawbacks though, this is an excellent setup. It's small, it's highly portable, and the modularity allows you to use these batteries in different ways, depending on what best suits your needs on any given trip. And because of all that, this has become our favorite portable power station setup to take out with us on just about every one of our trips. That is just so long as I'm not trying to make pizza at camp, because if I am, then I'm taking the Bluetti AC60P, and you can watch my review of that power station by clicking here. And of course, if you're interested in picking up one or both of these power stations, I will have links in the description below to where you can click on them and pick them up. But anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you for watching.